Donald Trump Jr. did not walk into the hearing room like a man under investigation. He walked in like a man auditioning for a reboot of the Trump brand. Camera aware, shoulders loose, smile calibrated. Behind him, aides followed in silent formation. Ahead of him, the Democrats sat like loaded springs. The hearing hadn't started, but the battle lines had. And in this story, make no mistake, the villains arrive first. Trump Jr. and his father, the sitting president of the United States, were not background shadows in today's hearing. They were the headline, the scandal, the operation. The committee had one job: to determine whether the Trump family built a crypto-based shadow bank behind the shield of presidential power. But as always in Trump world, what you see is rarely what's being sold. So, while the gavel came down with formality, the air in the chamber had already turned electric. The chairman read into the record, "This hearing convenes under authority to investigate allegations of financial misconduct tied to cryptocurrency fundraising conducted by the Trump family during and after the 2020 election cycle." It was the kind of sentence that sounds clinical in print and explosive out loud. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She didn't look up. She didn't nod. She uncapped her pen and drew one line on a legal pad. Across from her, Trump Jr. adjusted his jacket, caught sight of a camera light blinking red, and offered a smirk. When he raised his hand to take the oath, his voice was steady, even casual. Then came the statement that cracked the floorboards of the room. "I'm not a banker, Madam Congresswoman. I'm just a guy who's seen how the system works and how it crushes anyone who dares to bypass it. That's why we built what we built, to give people a different lane." The phrase "we built what we built" was delivered with the same tone someone might use for a garage startup, not a coin bearing a sitting president's name. Then he leaned into it. This was not a defense. It was a TED Talk. He told the room that after his family was debanked, frozen out of loans, locked out of meetings in New York's financial core, they turned to cryptocurrency. "We didn't jump on crypto because it was trendy," he said. "We were locked out of the banks because of our name. My father became president, and suddenly the phone stopped ringing. It wasn't just rhetoric. It was storytelling, crafted, tested, perhaps even rehearsed." Some Republican members nodded slowly, as if drawn in by the underdog angle. After all, what was more American than saying the system turned against you and you built your own? But across the room, Jasmine Crockett's expression didn't shift. Her eyes stayed on him, unblinking. Her pen moved once more. She had not interrupted. Not once. Trump Jr. kept the floor, relishing the silence. That was the moment he overplayed it. Crockett raised one hand. No anger, no theater, just clarity. "Mr. Trump," she said evenly, "are you claiming you turned to cryptocurrency, not for profit, but for patriotism?" The pause in the room was surgical. Trump Jr. flashed that familiar grin. I turned to freedom. Cameras clicked. Democrats whispered. Crockett said nothing. She simply folded the file in front of her, gently. The moment had been marked. The first punch had landed, but it wasn't clear yet which side had thrown it harder. The game had started, and both players had come to win. And just like that, the grin slipped. The swagger softened. For a man who had just declared his crypto crusade was about freedom, Donald Trump Jr. now looked like someone realizing the Wi-Fi went out during his TED Talk. Moments earlier, he had been spinning sound bites like a seasoned circus act, pivoting from persecution to patriotism in under 10 seconds. He invoked Biden Inc. like it was a Netflix villain franchise, casually throwing out accusations of influence peddling as if tossing peanuts at a crowd. But Congressman Jasmine Crockett had done her homework, and she didn't come to play cable news tennis. "Mr. Trump," she said, flipping a page with surgical poise, "I have here transcripts from your Fox News appearance, where you described Biden Inc. as owned, bought, sold, and with that, the floor dropped. The clip rolled. There he was, Donald Trump Jr., on national television, launching an all-out assault on Hunter Biden, MBNA, Amtrak, and the deep, dark machinery of American grift. But before the echoes of "they bought Biden" could fade, Crockett lowered the boom with timing so lethal it should be studied in military academies. And while you were saying that, your father was preparing a Trump coin fundraiser in Palm Beach, valued at $1.2 million per head. You could almost hear the record scratch across the room. Now, to his credit, or perhaps to his long years of media training, Trump Jr. didn't flinch. He smiled with that all-too-familiar expression that said, "I've danced through worse headlines. It was a free-market event," he offered coolly. "No one forced anyone to buy in. No access was promised. If someone wants to believe in our vision, they're free to." Translation: it's not bribery if it's wrapped in branding. Cue the light applause from the Republican flank, the kind of limp political theater meant to suggest a lifeline had been thrown. But Crockett wasn't finished. She hadn't even begun. She leaned forward, voice steady, almost cordial. "And about that leaked recording, the one where your finance advisor allegedly says, 'If you want to meet Don, start with the token.'" Don Jr. snapped back instantly, almost too quickly. "So now we're building entire federal cases off hot mics and unhappy interns?" He chuckled. "What about Clinton's dinners in Morocco? That wasn't crypto, but somehow it smelled worse." This was classic Trump playbook. Deflect, diminish, then drag someone else into the mud with you. Except this time, Crockett came armed. She gave a nod. The staffer in the back tapped the screen. The audio clip played. And there it was, clear as any transaction on the blockchain. $500K in token gets you a dinner, $1 gets you 5 minutes. The oxygen left the room. A Democratic aide dropped their pen. One Republican leaned back, exhaled hard, and somewhere in the second row a senator whispered, "That's not fake." Don Jr. didn't speak. He looked down, not at his notes, but at nothing at all, because no script had prepared him for this moment when the grift spoke for itself. And Crockett? She hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't have to. The audio had done it for her. But the real question wasn't whether the recording was real. It was whether it was the only one. And as the silence hung heavier than any gavel, eyes began to shift, not toward Trump Jr., but toward the empty seat reserved for the one man whose signature had greenlit it all. Because if $1 million buys 5 minutes with the son, what exactly does it buy with the father? There was a moment, just a sliver of one, when it looked like Donald Trump Jr. might claw his way back. Sitting up straighter, recalibrating his tone, he fired off his rebuttal like a man who'd been trained to dance around facts while sounding profoundly persecuted. "You have no chain of custody for that tape, no timestamp, and no court has validated it. You're building smoke, not fire." It was the kind of argument that doesn't need to be true. It just needs to stall the clock. And for a second, it did. He looked around, waiting for heads to nod. A few did, out of habit more than conviction. But Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She just shifted to the next blade in her briefcase. "Then let's talk wallets," she said. "Public wallets. Do you or do you not have access to the main fund associated with Trump coin distributions?" It was the kind of question that comes with no safe exits. But Don Jr., schooled in the family tradition of plausible deniability, took the usual route. Run, don't answer. "I'm not the wallet manager," he replied smoothly. "That's handled by a trust. I don't sign, I don't touch." One could almost hear the invisible asterisk at the end of every word. "But I do benefit." This wasn't testimony. It was a legal yoga class. But Crockett wasn't there to play semantics. She reached for a new file. "According to IRS disclosures," she said, almost conversationally, 3 pro-Trump PACs received a combined $8 million in contributions, traceable to wallets associated with the token's initial distribution. Trump Jr. shrugged. The grin tried to return. "8 million in this world is a drop," he said, like a man explaining why his $30,000 Rolex shouldn't be considered luxury. "You're looking at a revolution and asking why someone paid the toll to join." It was the kind of line that would have killed on Twitter in 2017, back when slogans still counted as strategy. But Crockett wasn't finished with the receipts. She gestured. A new exhibit appeared on the monitors, a list of Mar-a-Lago fundraising guests, matched, down to the last Satoshi, to the token wallet IDs. Trump Jr. interrupted with a scoff. "People go to dinners. People buy tokens. It doesn't mean there's a deal." And that, right there, was the problem. In the Trump universe, meaning is always optional. Evidence is never evidence. And coincidence? Coincidence is a constitutional right. Then came the line that cut through the fog. Crockett leaned in. Her voice didn't rise, but her words landed like a closing bell. "Then why did 4 of them receive presidential pardons 3 months later?" The room tensed. You could feel the trajectory shift. The air thickened. The Republicans went silent. Phones stopped scrolling. And for the first time in the hearing, Don Jr. didn't have a single syllable ready. Because now it wasn't just about tokens or dinners or loopholes. Now it was about the intersection between a coin, a guest list, and the powers of a sitting president. And the next line of questioning? It wasn't going to stop with the sun. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was historic. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for commentary because it is the commentary. Donald Trump Jr. sat motionless, no longer dodging, spinning, or smirking, just staring at a piece of paper now folded twice over in his clenched hand. Only minutes earlier, he'd barked at the room like a libertarian preacher at a fintech revival. "That's called decentralization," he had declared, as if 22% of offshore crypto routed through the UAE, Panama, and Russia were just a charming side effect of digital liberty. "You don't regulate air. Why regulate code?" he asked. A line so absurd it deserved its own bumper sticker. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't laughing, and neither was FinCEN. When Crockett displayed the flagged wallets, each one a neat little knot tied to Trump coin, Mar-a-Lago, and presidential pardons, the hearing room shifted from political theater to criminal heat map. 4 wallets, 4 dinner guests, 4 pardons, all wrapped up in a 90-day span so suspicious it might as well have come with confetti and a coupon for obstruction of justice. Don Jr. tried to shrug it off, muttering, "Pardons are presidential power, not mine." Which was true, in the same way that a getaway driver doesn't technically rob the bank. But Crockett, steady as a surgeon, wasn't finished. Yet 3 of those wallets also paid into your personal legal defense fund weeks prior, she said, cool and clean. The sentence didn't need a mic drop. It was the mic drop. And then, as if summoned by karma itself, a Democrat read the final nail aloud. Wallet XJ19Q paid $500,000 to Trump Legal Trust, then received a pardon for financial crimes across 4 jurisdictions. The air thickened. One Republican rubbed his temples. Another began scrolling their phone, not even pretending to take notes. And there sat Trump Jr., no longer selling freedom or spinning disruption, just gripping a sheet of paper, silently weighing whether this circus still had a net. Because if presidential power was not his, then whose fingerprints were on the cash? The wallets, the dinner list, the trust account that paid his attorneys while the rest of America was told to tighten its belts. But Crockett didn't need to ask that question. Yet. Because the eyes in the room had already moved from the sun to the man who signed the pardons. And by the time she reached for the next folder, it wasn't just Donald Trump Jr. who looked cornered. It was the presidency itself that had started to look like a shell company. By now, the hearing didn't feel like a hearing anymore. It felt like a slow-motion implosion. The kind of collapse that doesn't roar, but whispers. Jasmine Crockett, sensing the momentum shift like a seasoned litigator, didn't pounce. She shifted gears, lowered her voice, smoothed her delivery, made the kill look like concern. "You've said you were debanked. That New York banks refused to deal with you. Why do you think that happened?" It wasn't a question. It was an open invitation to hang himself politely. Trump Jr. took the bait because politics got weaponized, he said, as if delivering the moral of a bedtime story. We couldn't get loans not because of our numbers, but because of our name. And just like that, he slipped back into victim mode. The banks, the media, the Democrats, it's always someone else's conspiracy when your empire runs out of credit. But Crockett didn't blink. She simply asked, "Is that why you began routing donations through digital assets instead of FEC-tracked banking?" It was the kind of question that doesn't ask for an answer. It demands a confession. Don Jr. hesitated. Not long enough for television, but just long enough for anyone in the room who'd ever managed a lie to recognize the delay. "We looked for options," he offered. "When the banks shut the door, we built our own." A sentence that would have sounded inspiring if it hadn't landed in a congressional hearing about crypto-financed corruption. Then came the receipt. Crockett reached for an internal email, quietly devastating. A campaign advisor had written detailed instructions to route major donors from traditional accounts to token wallets, explicitly to shield sensitive contributors. There it was, in black and white, the operational manual for laundering political identity under the glow of a blockchain. Don Jr. tried to chuckle, as if the evidence in front of him were a joke he just didn't get. "That's one guy's suggestion. Not an operation," he said. "We didn't approve that." But the phrase didn't carry weight. It sagged under the pressure of every word he didn't say. Crockett looked directly at him. "You didn't stop it either." And the result was 18 million off-grid before Super Tuesday. It was no longer about crypto. It was about architecture. about building an alternative financial tunnel right under the nose of the Federal Election Commission. And now that the blueprint was public, even the Republican side of the chamber had gone mute. Some scribbled, some fidgeted, no one defended. Then came the unraveling. Trump Jr., now visibly strained, reached for the one thing Trump world always sells better than real estate: pity. "We were surviving," he said. "They froze our accounts. What were we supposed to do? Sit and die while being investigated every week?" It was an appeal not to law but to emotion, and Crockett, as if flipping a switch, shut it down cold. "You weren't surviving," she said, her voice razor flat. "You were rebuilding a shadow bank, fueled by faith and zero oversight." The words landed like lead. The son of the president, accused on live television, not of stealing money, but of replacing the system that tracks it. And in the back of the room, someone whispered what the rest were thinking. This wasn't a loophole. This was the plan. And just like that, the story turned again, not toward Trump Jr., but toward the structure he helped build and the presidency that watched it happen. The execution wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice, didn't pound the desk, didn't appeal to outrage. She simply changed the temperature in the room. Cold, even, surgical. "Let's assume everything you said is true," she began, already signaling it wasn't. "That you were exiled by the banking elite. That your response was innovation. Then answer this. Why was the National Security Council warning the White House about your operation?" The room didn't breathe. This wasn't a policy dispute anymore. This was national security. And in a chamber where most scandals unravel slowly, this one dropped like a guillotine. Trump Jr. stalled. The reflexes were gone. His lawyer made a desperate bid for a sidebar, raising his hand like it was still 1997, and the court might grant mercy. The chair denied the request. The clock was still running, and Crockett was just getting started. She produced the first memo, stamped urgent, a 2020 internal NSC warning outlining the risks of politically linked crypto assets. Foreign adversarial capital, it read, under legal ambiguity. The recommendation? Immediate review. Trump Jr. blinked hard, voice barely audible. "I've never seen that memo." No one believed him, not even his side. The silence wasn't skeptical, it was exhausted. Then came the second memo, dated 1 day later, addressed directly to Donald J. Trump, the sitting President of the United States. In the margin, reviewed, no action. That wasn't negligence, that was policy. And for the first time all day, something cracked. Not in Don Jr.'s voice, but in the GOP bench. One Republican lawmaker quietly pulled his name from the list of Trump coin supporters. No speech, no drama, just shame. Crockett didn't gloat. She stated it plain. You knew. Your father knew. And still, you monetized political access via untraceable chains. The phrase untraceable chains didn't just describe crypto anymore. It described a presidency wrapped in plausible deniability, signed with digital silence, and sealed with legal ambiguity. But the real fracture came next. Crockett queued up a final audio recording, this time from inside Trump.org itself. No spin, no leaks, just one of their own, saying it into a microphone. As long as the wallets stay off the radar and the campaign messaging isn't too direct, we're safe. Crypto lets us stay liquid without FEC breathing down our neck. There it was. Not speculation, not conspiracy. A strategy. A deliberate decision designed workaround to U.S. election law, spoken in-house, under oath, and now forever in the congressional record. Trump Jr. didn't speak. He didn't even lift his head. The swagger that carried him into the room hours earlier had disappeared under the weight of a single truth. This wasn't about decentralization or innovation. This was about building a machine no one could see until someone turned on the lights. The chairman leaned forward. The committee will now begin deliberations. And as the members reached for their folders, one truth hung heavier than the air. This hadn't been a testimony. It had been a blueprint, exposed. And somewhere beyond that room, the man who reviewed the memo and took no action had just become the next unavoidable question. By the time Part 7 began, Donald Trump Jr. had stopped performing. No more smirks. No more sarcasm. No more deflections dressed as declarations. He sat back in his chair, no longer trying to own the room, just trying to survive it. His eyes locked onto nothing in particular. Maybe the back wall, maybe his father's silence. His lawyer, who once raised objections like confetti, now sat still, understanding that no strategy survives this kind of exposure. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to press. She didn't need another memo or voice clip. The battlefield was scorched, and now she only had to plant the flag. "Do you deny," she asked flatly, "that the crypto channels were used to bypass campaign finance laws?" It was a yes or no question, which meant, in Trump world, it required a third answer. Don Jr., voice subdued, offered it. "I deny that we broke any law as written." That phrase, "as written," was doing a lot of heavy lifting. A defense built not on innocence, but on the elasticity of outdated statutes. Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't look at the committee. She looked at him. "Good," she said, "because now the laws are being rewritten, with your name in the footnotes." It was less a threat than a certainty. Don Jr. might have entered that hearing as a proxy for innovation, disruption, the misunderstood outsider. He was now the case study, the reason reform has a deadline. The chairman, almost mechanically, asked the standard procedural question. Did the witness have anything further to add or amend for the record? Don Jr.'s reply was soft, automatic. No. No clarifications, no denials, no fiery rebuke, just the verbal equivalent of a signature on the wreckage. Crockett closed her binder, not triumphantly, but deliberately. And then she ended it. No theatrics, no moral high horse, just the most accurate summary anyone had delivered all day. Your operation wasn't innovation. It was evasion, weaponized by access and disguised as technology. The phrase hung in the air like the final chord of a requiem. It didn't need applause. It needed acknowledgement. Across the aisle, the Republican side was silent. No rebuttals, no angry defense. One congressman quietly closed his laptop, gathered his papers, and walked out. Not in protest, but in surrender. Because at this point, defending Trump Jr. didn't feel like defending a colleague. It felt like defending a glitch in the American system, a glitch they had just watched collapse in real time under oath on camera. And the cameras were still rolling. Just when the air had started to thin from Trump Jr.'s collapse, Jasmine Crockett pulled the oxygen out entirely. She didn't raise her voice, didn't change her pace. She simply requested what everyone in the room had been dreading and expecting. "Mr. Chairman," she said, "I formally request that this committee issue a subpoena to Donald J. Trump, not as a witness, but as a direct subject of investigation." No one blinked, because there was nothing left to pretend. The chairman nodded once. The language was precise, deadly. The President of the United States would be summoned to answer questions, not only about crypto fundraising, but about federal pardons signed under a veil of donor anonymity, and warnings from the National Security Council he willfully ignored. It was no longer a hearing. It was an indictment, written in real time. The Republican side snapped back like a slingshot fired too late. One congressman stood, voice raised in the desperate cadence of scripted outrage. "This committee is now a campaign stage." The words echoed through the chamber like a dated slogan no one bought. But Crockett was already on her feet, composed and razor-sharp. "No," she replied. "This stage became a campaign the moment Donald Trump monetized it. We're here to return it to law." It wasn't a quip. It was a mission statement, and the silence that followed didn't mean agreement. It meant surrender. Trump Jr., his lawyer, now visibly deflated, made one last procedural gasp. A request to recess the hearing. The chair denied it. "Financial questioning remains," he said flatly. The message was clear. No one gets to exit the courtroom they built, especially not early. Then, the moment that twisted the knife. The camera zoomed in on Exhibit 47B, a scanned document from Mar-a-Lago. It wasn't some anonymous ledger. It wasn't hearsay. It was a signed page from Trump's own fundraising event. Token commemorative access tier, bearing the bold, unmistakable signature of Donald J. Trump. No redactions, no ambiguity. A name now fused to a scheme where cryptocurrency didn't just buy dinner. It bought influence, access, and, perhaps, forgiveness. Crockett didn't need to add a single word, because in that moment, the name at the center of the hearing had changed. The son had been cornered, but now the father had entered the frame, not as protector, but as principal. And the committee, once accused of chasing shadows, had just subpoenaed the spotlight. The hearing wasn't over, but the damage had already escaped the room. Even as Donald Trump Jr. sat frozen at the witness table, clutching a legal pad with no more words left to write, the outside world was detonating in real time. Fox News, yes, that Fox News, broke into scheduled programming with a brutal chyron. Breaking: Trump.org's crypto platform under criminal review. For a network that once staged standing ovations for Trump press conferences, the tonal shift landed like a divorce announcement read over the dinner table. MSNBC, never one to miss a well-lit fire, followed up with its own editorial grenade. Shadow banking or soft treason. What crypto just revealed about the Trump operation? And just like that, the courtroom theater turned national trauma. There were no pundits spinning, no legal analysts hedging. Just headlines now bold enough to say what most had whispered for months. This wasn't just corruption. It was engineered evasion wrapped in digital glamour. Meanwhile, Twitter, now rebranded as X, but still the same unfiltered madhouse, was melting down. A 17-second clip of Trump Jr. bowing his head after Crockett's final blow was reposted 22 million times in under 3 hours. Captioned with phrases like, "The moment he knew" and "crypto confessional," the video didn't need explanation. It was the political equivalent of a mugshot in motion. The Trump comms team, never one to miss an opportunity to sound defiant and deeply tone-deaf, issued a brief statement. This is persecution disguised as oversight. But no one was buying. It didn't trend. It didn't circulate. It died at the source, like a punchline in a room that no longer wanted to laugh. And then came the civilian reaction, the crack in the dam that matters more than any headline. One self-identified Republican voter posted, "I voted Trump twice. But if this is real, and it sure sounds real, we got played." That line didn't come from Capitol Hill or a newsroom. It came from the grassroots, the base, the oxygen. And suddenly, the silence wasn't just inside the hearing room. It was in town halls, group chats, living rooms. On financial analyst feeds, the reaction was even sharper. A top Wall Street strategist posted a quote straight from Crockett's mouth, now immortalized in screenshot form. "Crypto lets us stay liquid without the FEC. That's not innovation. That's treason. No hashtags, no emojis. Just the quote, hanging there like a verdict America didn't need a court to hear." And while the hearing still had one act left, the real trial had already begun. In every screen, every feed, every conversation that now ended not in debate, but in disbelief. The hearing adjourned, but no one stood up. Not at first. The silence that settled wasn't procedural, it was post-mortem. Donald Trump Jr. remained seated, motionless, like a man who had run out of exits and was now staring at the shape of consequences for the first time in his life. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look for his lawyer. He just sat there, a prince without a script, in a courtroom that had already moved past him. The chairman, voice low but unmistakably final, read the line that would headline tomorrow's front pages. "This committee will forward its findings to the Department of Justice for immediate criminal review under federal finance and pardon influence laws." No one cheered. This wasn't a win. It was a reckoning, the kind that lingers. Jasmine Crockett closed her binder without a word. She didn't make eye contact, didn't savor the moment. She simply stood, turned, and walked out, straight-backed, unsmiling, unbothered. The camera followed her like it knew exactly where history was going. Behind her, the staffers whispered. "Trump won't come," one aide murmured. "He'll fight the subpoena." Another voice, quieter but sharper, replied, "He doesn't have to come. America already saw what mattered." And they had. The hearings hadn't needed Donald J. Trump's voice. His name was everywhere already, on the memos ignored, on the dinner programs signed, on the tokens minted in his image and sold in the shadow of his office. His absence had said more than any denial could. And now, all that remained was the chair reserved for him, perfectly lit, perfectly untouched, with a tag that read like a challenge and a dare in the same breath. Scheduled witness, Donald J. Trump, former president. The camera panned wide one last time, catching the empty seat, the silent witness, the trail of evidence still glowing faintly under the fluorescent lights. No one moved to clear the nameplate. No one needed to. The meaning was carved in. And then, as the screen dimmed, one final message appeared in stark white text. No music, no spin, just truth, unblinking. The coin is public. The wallets are real. The subpoenas are coming. Cut to black.